Tessa bit her lip. I feel I ought to have said goodbye or good luck, but with all the rushing about, you needn't worry, Jim said, coming into the drawing room, Will just behind him. Shadow hunters don't say goodbye, not before a battle, or good luck. You must behave as if return is certain, not a matter of chance. We don't require luck, said Will, throwing himself onto a chair beside Jessamine, who shot him an angry look. We have a heavenly mandate, after all. With God on your side, what does luck matter? We have a heavenly mandate, after all. With God on your side, what does luck matter? He sounded surprisingly bitter. Oh, stop being so depressing, Will, said Jessamine. We're playing cards. You can either join the game or be quiet. Will raised an eyebrow. What are you playing? Pope Joan, Jessamine said coolly, dealing out cards. I was just explaining the rules to Mr. Gray. Miss Lovelace says you win by ridding yourself of all your cards. That seems backward to me. Nate grinned across the table at Jessamine and dimpled annoyingly. Will poked at the steaming cup that sat beside Nathaniel's elbow. Is there any tea in this, he inquired, or is it simply pure brandy? Nate flushed. Brandy is restorative. Yes, said Jem, a little edge to his voice. It restores men right to the poorhouse. Really, the two of you, such hypocrites. It isn't as if Will doesn't drink, and Jessamine broke off, biting her lip. You two are just fussing because Henry and Charlotte wouldn't take you along with them, she said finally. Because you're too young. She smiled at Nate across the table. I prefer the company of a more mature gentleman myself. Nate, Tessa thought disgustedly, is exactly 2 years older than Will, hardly a century. Nor is he by any stretch of the imagination mature. But before she could say anything, a great echoing boom sounded through the institute. Nate raised his eyebrows. I thought this wasn't a real church. I thought there were no bells. There aren't. That sound isn't church bells ringing. Will rose to his feet. That's the summoning bell. It means someone is downstairs and demands conference with the shadow hunters. And since James and I are the only ones here... He looked at Jessamine, and Tessa realized he was waiting for Jessamine to contradict him, to say that she was a shadow hunter too. But Jessamine was smiling at Nate, and he was leaning in to say something in her ear. Neither of them was paying attention to what else was going on in the room. Jem looked at Will and shook his head. They both turned toward the door, and as they went out, Jem looked at Tessa and gave her a little shrug. I wish you were a shadow hunter, she thought his eyes were saying. But maybe it was simply what she hoped they were saying. Perhaps he was merely smiling at her kindly and there was no meaning in it. Nate poured himself another hot water and brandy. He and Jessamine had abandoned the pretense that they were playing cards and were leaning close to each other, murmuring in low voices. Tessa felt a dull thump of disappointment. Somehow she had expected that Nate's ordeal would have made him more thoughtful, more inclined to understand that there were larger things at work in the world, more important things than his own immediate pleasures. She expected nothing better of Jessamine, but what had once seemed charming in Nate now grated on her nerves in a way that surprised her. She leaned toward the window again. There was a carriage in the courtyard. Will and Jem were on the front steps. With them was a man in an evening dress, elegant black tailcoat, high silk hat, a white waistcoat that shone under the witch-like torches. He looked like a mundane Tessa, though at this distance it was difficult to tell. As she watched, he raised his arms and made a broad gesture. She saw Will look at Jem, and Jem nod and wondered what on earth they were talking about. She looked past the man to the coach behind him and froze. Instead of a coat of arms, the name of Business Enterprise was printed across one of the doors. Mortmain and Company. Mortmain, the man her father had worked for, whom Nathaniel had blackmailed, who had introduced her brother to the shadow world. What was he doing here? She looked at Nate again, her feeling of annoyance washed away by a wave of protectiveness. If he knew Mortmain was here, he would doubtless be upset. It would be better if she found out what was going on before he did. She slid off the windowsill and made her way quietly to the door, deep in conversation with Jessamine. Nate hardly seemed to notice as she left the room.